Welcome to This Explainer. Right off the bat today, we're breaking down the exact, highly repeatable method that one massive streaming giant used to relentlessly disrupt its very own business, completely outmaneuvering its competitors before they even got a chance to swing. We're going to unpack the core concepts from Jan Mauro's incredible analysis, the Reinvention Engine, and extract the absolute blueprint for continuous, aggressive innovation.
Okay, let's dive right into things by confronting probably the most predictable failure in all of business. You know the one, the graveyard of well-run, super smart companies like Blockbuster that literally optimize their way straight into irrelevance just to protect their cash cows. It happens all the time. A company finds a highly profitable product, they build a massive organization to defend it, and then they spend their remaining years fighting off the future. And the defense feels really responsible. The board claps, the quarterly numbers look great. But here's the thing, the future doesn't negotiate.
And speaking of Blockbuster, let's go ahead and debunk a famous founder myth right now. We've all heard the legend, right? The founder gets hit with a $40 late fee for a movie rental, gets absolutely furious, and just invents a subscription service on the spot. It sounds like a great movie script, but the reality? It was actually a highly methodical, cold, calculated spreadsheet decision. True reinvention isn't some magical lightning strike of consumer anger. It's a deliberate and honestly super uncomfortable choice to abandon a revenue model that is already working. By 1999, this company chose to throw out those hugely profitable per-rental fees in favor of a flat monthly subscription. They chose to align with their customer instead of exploiting their mistakes.
So what is the blueprint behind this? It breaks down into 5 parts. First, a prep step. Stop defending the cash cow. Then the 4 rules of the engine. Cannibalize yourself first, bet on the curve, engineer freedom through talent, and finally, own the customer relationship. Let's look under the hood.
Step 1 is our prep step. Before you do anything else, you have to stop defending the cash cow.
To do this, I want you to ask yourself a tough question. What is your late fee? Seriously, what is the part of your business right now that makes money purely through customer friction? Because getting rid of that and aligning with your customer early on is what creates the stable, recurring revenue you're going to need to fund your future. Incumbents love to optimize for friction. They depend on late fees, annoying switching costs, and customer inertia. But a true disruptor strategy, that optimizes entirely for satisfaction. Removing friction builds predictable revenue. And that predictable revenue is exactly the financial bedrock that makes all your later, riskier reinventions totally affordable.
Which leads us perfectly into Rule 1, cannibalize yourself first.
Think about how wild this rapid evolution is. The DVD by mail business was their entire profit engine. I'm talking logistics centers, massive brand trust, incredibly fat margins. But in 2007, they launched streaming. They deliberately built a product to make their own healthy business completely obsolete. They essentially took the cash and the trust from the DVD days and used it to fund a technology that would replace it. They literally taught their own customers to stop using the product that paid the bills. Because they realized early on, if someone was going to destroy their business, it absolutely had to be them.
But hold on, you've got to be really careful with the edges of this rule. Case in point, the disastrous 2011 Quickster split. The golden rule here is you cannibalize your product to give the customer an upgrade, but you never, ever cannibalize their experience just to simplify your own internal org chart. When they tried to split the DVD and streaming businesses into 2 totally separate websites with 2 separate bills, customers were furious. I mean, they lost 800,000 subscribers in a single quarter. So the lesson is paramount. Self-cannibalization is a superpower when the customer feels like they're getting a seamless upgrade and your company absorbs all the friction. But it's absolute poison when you offload that transition pain onto your users.
All right, so you've built the cannibal. Now you have to fund it. That brings us to Rule 2, bet on the curve.
Look, every single board of directors is going to push you to protect near-term quarterly numbers. That's just a fact. So you have to completely reframe how your company views spending. When this streaming giant moved into original content and global expansion, they burned billions of dollars in cash. They were running deeply negative free cash flow for years. Wall Street critics looked at that quarterly cash burn and called it reckless financial waste. But the company? They were betting on the long-term trajectory of the market, the curve. They were perfectly willing to endure immediate pain to build a global position that no one could ever catch up to.
So, how do you know if you're actually investing or just setting money on fire? You apply this exact 4-part test to your own budget to separate visionary capital investment from simple waste. 1. Does your spending build an owned compounding asset? 2. Does it serve a very specific thesis about where the market is headed? 3. Does it reinforce your other strategic bets? And 4, this one is crucial, is it sized so that your company can actually survive if you happen to be wrong?
If you're spending checks all 4 of those boxes, you're making a genuine investment in the future, and you have to fiercely defend that against the pressures of your next earnings call. This is a massive mindset shift. By reframing content as a compounding asset that drives retention, they justify those massive cash burns to achieve global scale. Traditional Hollywood studios always viewed content as a product expense, something to minimize, right? But this company viewed their content library as the very engine keeping subscribers from clicking cancel. Once you start viewing something as a capital asset that builds a competitive moat, your entire goal shifts from minimizing its cost to maximizing its scale. But a bold strategy like that is completely worthless if your company is too tangled in red tape to execute it. That brings us to Rule 3, engineer freedom through talent.
Now, the sequence here is absolutely critical. Because honestly, if you just grant freedom to everyone before replacing your adequate performers with exceptional ones, you are not going to get speed. You're just going to get chaos. You can't just remove approval chains and hope for the best. First, you have to massively concentrate exceptional talent. Then you replace traditional micromanagement with rich context, giving your teams the strategy, the data, the specific constraints they need. And actually, only then do you grant them the freedom to make huge decisions without asking for permission.
And that mechanism relies heavily on what they call the keeper test. It's intense but necessary. The question is, if this person told me they were leaving, would I fight to keep them? In a high-freedom environment, an adequate performer isn't just neutral, they're actually a toxic drag on the entire system. By paying at the absolute top of the market and strictly applying this test to keep only exceptional players, they built an organization capable of executing massive, rapid transitions without ever being bogged down by committees. Their judgment simply beats your rules.
Finally, we reach Rule 4, own the customer relationship. This is the safety net that lets you survive all these crazy transitions.
If you become obsessed with overall demand rather than just your direct competitors, you start to realize something profound. You aren't just competing with rival streaming services. You are literally competing with human biology. You are competing with sleep. Most companies define their competitors way too narrowly. By redefining their competition as anything a person might possibly do at their leisure time, playing video games, scrolling social media, or just sleeping, they set a much higher bar. They optimized entirely to become the default, absolutely lowest friction choice for your free evening. And how do you win that leisure time? Well, you own the experience end-to-end. By using a recommendation engine to make a massive catalog feel like a customized personal channel, you bomb the customer to your platform, not just to a specific show. Think about it. The shows are just the raw materials. The actual product is the algorithm. It's that system that reliably connects you to something you'll love within seconds of opening the app. This relentless personalization is what creates a deep, habitual dependence on the platform itself. And let me tell you, that depth of relationship builds unbelievable leverage. Because they owned the customer bond so deeply, they were able to completely reinvent their revenue model in just 3 years, literally adding billions in revenue entirely on their own terms. When subscriber growth started to naturally slow down, they didn't panic. They simply repriced the massive demand they had already captured. They converted freeloaders with a crackdown on paid sharing. They introduced an ad-supported tier for price-sensitive viewers. And they rolled out premium live events to create incredibly valuable advertising inventory. And the result of all those massive changes? Just unprecedented pricing power. I mean, despite cracking down on passwords and throwing ads into the mix, they drove record signups. They proved their model was undeniable. Pushing past 300 million global members proved that when you completely, truly own the customer relationship, you can change your product, you can change your format, you can even change your pricing, all without triggering a mass exodus. Because the bond is to the experience itself. And that makes reinvention not just survivable, but immensely profitable. So to wrap up this explainer, I want to bring this directly home to your own reality. If these rules don't make you at least a little bit uncomfortable, you probably aren't applying them correctly. Think about it. What is your most profitable product right now that some hungry startup is currently trying to destroy? Are you just going to sit there and wait for them to do it? Or are you going to build the cannibal yourself? Basically, what cash cow are you finally ready to sacrifice?